In today's class, we are going to be discussing the concept of working capital management, a practical topic. All right. Every individual or businesses will require working capital. So in today's class, we are going to talk about the introduction to working capital management, the working capital cycle, and how to estimate the working capital cycle. Not only that, we also discuss how to reduce the working capital cycle. Then we'll talk about the working capital ratios. Okay. We're also going to talk about over-capitalization and under-capitalization. And finally, we are going to discuss the factors that determine the working capital requirements for an organization. Of course, we are also going to have practical illustrations to drive home the points and also to demonstrate the learnings. All right. So what do you understand by working capital management? Every business entity, be it large or small, private or public, requires working capital to be able to operate optimally and to ensure smooth uh, operation of the business. Okay. So generally, working capital are required for the purpose of paying salaries, okay, purchase inventories and other supplies, and settle short-term obligation as they become due. When a company does not have sufficient working capital, it may impair the ability of the business to be able uh, to run as efficient as possible, and at the same time to ensure the going concern of the business, because inadequate working capital will impair the ability of the company to take advantage of market condition and also to prevent the collapse of the business. So what then is working capital? There is difference between working capital and working capital management. The working capital represents the difference between current asset and current liability. Of course, it is the amount required for the day-to-day running of a business. Like I mentioned earlier, company will need to pay salaries at the end of the month. Company will want to buy inventories, which will be sold to customers to generate sales. So company will also need to settle short-term obligations as they become due. Company may want to buy supplies, stationaries, and all sorts of things to run the activities of the business. So if the capital required is not available, then it will limit the ability of the company to function optimally. All right. So that is working capital. On the flip side, the working capital management represents the judicious and efficient management of each component of current asset and current liability, including inventories, account receivable, prepayment, cash and cash equivalents, and account payable. Okay, so the management of each component of current asset and current liability in an efficient and a judicious manner is what working capital management is all about. Therefore, the primary purpose of working capital management is to ensure that the company is liquid enough, okay? Is liquid enough in order to meet short-term obligations, okay, and the operating costs of the business, in order to meet short-term obligations and operating costs of the business. That is the primary purpose of working capital management. So let's talk about working capital cycle. The working capital cycle represents the length of time between when cash is paid to acquired raw material and when cash is finally received from debtors through sales. The shorter the cycle, the better for the organization. All right. A shorter working capital cycle will enable the company to be liquid, while a longer working capital cycle simply means that capital is tying down without generating any return to the business, and company must avoid that. And that is essence of working capital management. Okay? Therefore, how do you compute working capital cycle? So before we talk about computation of working capital cycle, let's talk about the diagram of working capital cycle. Like we said, working capital cycle is the length of time between when cash is paid to acquire raw material and when cash is finally received from debtors through sales. All right. So we are saying that you have purchased, we have used cash to purchase raw material. This raw material will be converted to work in progress. The work in progress will be converted to finished goods. Then customer will then come and purchase the finished goods. Okay, let me reduce this. Okay, so debtors will come and purchase the finished goods. Then, of course, it is expected that finally they are going to pay cash. Therefore, we are saying that working capital cycle or operating cycle or cash operating cycle represents the length of time between when cash is used to purchase raw material and when cash is finally received from debtors through sales. This is what is known as operating cycle. This is operating cycle or working capital cycle or cash operating cycle, whatever you want to call it. All right then. So how do you calculate working capital cycle? There are majorly 5 components of working capital cycle, and each of them we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about each of them. Now, as far as working capital cycle is concerned, okay, let's do it this way. Calculating working capital cycle. Okay. Whenever you want to determine working capital cycle, of course, it must be expressed in days. So the first component will be raw material conversion period. So you are going to have raw material conversion period. Okay. I will explain each of them later on. Then we are going to have work in progress. Work in progress conversion period. Let me reduce this to make it faster. Raw material conversion period. Okay. Then work in progress conversion period. We're also going to have finished goods conversion period. The fourth one represents the debtors conversion period or collection period. Then, of course, you add up all of this. Let me adjust it. Okay, this, and this. You add up the 4 of them. This is what make up gross working capital. Okay, gross working capital cycle. Then you are going to less creditors payment period. Creditors payment period, you less from the gross operating cycle. The difference will represent the net operating cycle. All right, so this is how to compute working capital cycle. Would have been very easy if you are writing a professional exam and you just go to the question and pick raw material conversion period, work in progress, and all of that, but it's worth more than that. So let's talk about each of the components. All right. So raw material conversion period. Let's talk about raw material conversion period. So the raw material conversion period is represent the number of days raw material is held in store. All right. The number, when you want to purchase raw material, you go to the market and buy. Once you purchase the raw material, you have to put it in the warehouse. From the warehouse, then the material will be issued out for production. So you want to know what is the number of days the raw material is kept in the store before going into production. That is raw material conversion period. And it is computed, raw material conversion period is computed as raw material divided by raw material purchase or purchases. Raw material purchases all multiplied by 365 days or 360 days, depending on what you want to assume as number of days in a year. So whenever you want to compute raw material conversion period, it's simply the raw material divided by the raw material purchases. At times, you may want to use average numbers or average figures. So to get the average figures, so the opening raw material plus closing raw material will become average raw material. Therefore, average raw material divided by purchases, we give the multiplied by 365 days, we give the number of days raw material is held in store. Then the second one, work in progress conversion period. So the work in progress conversion period represents the length of time in the production cycle. You want to convert raw material to finished goods. So when you are in the production process, how many days or how long does it take the company to convert raw material to finished goods? So that is what raw material conversion period measures. So it measures the length of time in the production cycle, and it is computed as work in progress divided by cost of sales or cost of goods sold multiplied by 365 days in a year or 360 days for a year. All right. Then number 3, finished goods conversion period. The finished goods conversion period represents the number of days finished goods is held in store before being sold. When you finish production, you are going to keep it in the warehouse or in the store from where it will be issued out for sales, from there to be taken to the market to sell. Therefore, you want to know how long does the finished goods stay in the warehouse or in the store before being sold. That is what finished goods conversion period measures, and it is computed as finished goods divided by cost of sales multiplied by 365 days. Okay. Again, if examiner wants you to use average figures, then it has to be opening finished goods plus closing finished goods divided by 2. So that will give you average finished goods, then divided by cost of sales multiplied by 365. Then number 4, debtors collection period or debtors conversion period represents debtors. Okay. Debtors conversion period represent the number of days credit is given to customers. Okay. When you want to measure the number of days credit is given to customers, then you are trying to do debtors collection period or debtors conversion period, and it is computed as debtors divided by credit sales multiplied by 365 days in a year. Okay. Again, if you want to use average figures, It will be opening plus closing debtors divided by 2 all over credit sales multiplied by 365. Then finally, the fifth one is creditors payment period. The creditors payment period represents the number of days credit is taken from the supplier. Okay, the number of days credit is taken from the supplier represents the creditors payment period, and it is computed as creditors divided by credit purchases multiplied by 365 days in a year. So these are the formulas for calculating working capital cycle. So whenever you are asked to compute working capital cycle, you need to first of all go and do your working using all these formulas. So once you are done, then you come and post your raw material conversion period, work in progress conversion period, finished goods conversion period, debtors collection period. Then of course, that will give you the total operating cycle. Then you less the creditors payment period to have the net operating cycle. So that's basically how to compute working capital cycle. So with this, let's have practical illustration to demonstrate that. Let's have practical illustration to demonstrate how to compute working capital cycle. Okay. All right. Let's have this illustration. The following data were extracted from the financial statement of Oregon Limited. You are required to, using the above data, calculate the length of the cash operating cycle that is currently applicable to the company's operation for guidance of the management. You have to assume that all sales and purchases are on credit. Okay? You have to assume that all sales and purchases are on credit. So that is the question. So the name of the company is Oliveira, Oregon Limited. So solution, the name of this company is Oregon Limited. So we're asked to compute the length of cash operating cycle. So I would then say calculating cash operating cycle. Okay, so remember what I said. Cash operating cycle is the same thing as working capital cycle or operating cycle, net operating cycle, gross operating cycle. Whatever name that is being called is the same thing. So I want to calculate cash operating cycle. I need to go back to the question. If I have raw material, I will compute raw material conversion period. If I have work in progress, I will compute work in progress conversion period, and so on and so forth. So in this question, we are given raw material of 140,000 naira. So we have raw material of 140,000 naira. Therefore, we need to compute raw material conversion period, because it is not at all time that you are going to have all the variables in a question. So whichever one that you have is one you are going to compute for. But now that we have the raw material conversion period, then let's go on. We have raw material in the question. Let's compute raw material conversion period. Therefore, I would then say raw material conversion period equal to raw material divided by purchases multiplied by 365 days. In the question, you are not told whether to use 365 days or 360 days. So you need to make an assumption. So if you assume 365 days, at the end of your calculation, you have to state your assumption. If you assume 360 days, whichever one you have assumed, it is important that you state your assumption. So in this particular question, we are assuming 365 days. Okay? So I would then say equal. I will go back to the question. What is raw material? The raw material given is 140,000. Figures are in thousands. So I will just say 140 divided by purchases. Purchases, according to the question, is 560. Purchases is 560 divided by 560 multiplied by 365. So final answer would then be equal to, so 140 divided by 560 equal multiplied by 365. That's 91 days, rounding. 91 days is the raw material conversion period. Then I also need to calculate. Okay, I need to calculate. I will go back to the question if I have work in progress. Yes, we have work in progress of 70. We have work in progress of 70. Therefore, work in progress divided by cost of sales. All right. So I will say work in progress conversion period equal to work in progress divided by cost of sales multiplied by 365 days, which is equal to the work in progress according to the question is 70. Cost of sales is 840. So 70 divided by 840 multiplied by 365 days equal. So what do we have? 70 over 840. So what do we have? Bring out the calculation. 70 divided by 840 multiplied by 365. That's 30 days. 30 days. It takes the company 30 days to convert raw material to finished goods, or to convert work in progress to finished goods. Then number 3. So I will go back to the question if I have finished goods. Yes, we are given finished goods of 160. Therefore, finished goods divided by cost of sales of 840. Finished goods is 160. So I will say finished goods conversion period equal to finished goods divided by cost of goods sold. Cost of sales and cost of goods sold is the same thing. So equal to 160,000 divided by 840 multiplied by 365 days for a year. So 160 divided by 840 equal, then multiply by 365 equal, that's, oh, there's an error there. Let me recompose. 160 divided by 840 equal, then multiply by 365 equal, that's 70 days. Okay, then number 4. All right. So number 4, I need to consider debtors conversion period or debtors collection period, because in the question we also have debtors. Okay, we have debtors of 120. So 120 divided by credit sales. Examiner, you have been told that you have to assume that all sales and purchases are on credit. All sales and purchases are on credit. So debtors divided by sales. Okay. Debtors divided by credit sales multiplied by 365 days. Debtors, according to the question, is 120. Credit sales is 1,000. Here is 120, then 1,000 credit sales multiplied by 365 equal. So 120 divided by 1,000 multiplied by 365. That's 44 days. So 44 days is the debtors collection period. Then the last one, finished goods conversion period, okay, which is going to be finished goods divided by, creditors payment period, creditors payment period, okay, which is equal to creditors divided by credits purchases multiplied by 365 days. So according to the question, the creditors is 84, purchases is 560. So 84 divided by 560 multiplied by 365 days. So what do you have there? 84 divided by 560 equal, then multiply by 365 days. That's 55 days. 55 days. Okay? So now that I've computed for all the components of the working capital cycle as given in the question, so all I need to do is to go and post. So I would then say working capital cycle. Examiner has said cash operating cycle. So I would then say cash operating cycle. Okay, of course, like I said, must be expressed in days. So the first one that we computed is raw material conversion period. If I like, I can say raw material conversion period, or I can say the number of days raw material is held in store. So let's say number of days raw material is held in store. Okay. So based on our workings, the raw material conversion period is 91 days. So here is 91 days. Then the next one is, let me do it this way, raw material conversion period. Then the next one is length of time in the production cycle. Length of time in production cycle. That is work in progress conversion period. And we calculated 30 days. It took the company 30 days to convert raw material to work in progress. Then the next one is number of days finished goods is held in store before being sold. That is finished goods conversion period. And we calculated 70 days. Then we also have number of days credits is given to customers, which is debtors collection period. We calculated 44 days. So we add up the entire four components of that. That's 44 plus 191. This is 235 days. 235 days. This represents gross cash operating cycle. Then we need to less number of days credits is taken from supplier. Okay, number of days credit is taken from supplier, which is creditor's payment period. And we calculated 55 days. Here is 55 days. Okay, let me reduce this. 55 days. So this would then be the net cash operating cycle. So which is 235 minus 55 days, 180 days. So I would then say the cash operating cycle the cash operating cycle is 180 days. I would then say note, because we are not told whether to use 365 or 360 days. I would then say note 365 days. 365 days is assumed for a year. So I've stated my assumption, how I arrive at my numbers. Okay, so that is for that. So let's go back to the outline for discussion. Okay. All right. So you may be asked on how to reduce working capital cycle. How do you reduce working capital cycle? That's the next thing we want to discuss. Okay. So to reduce the working capital cycle, several actions can be taken. There are possible actions that can be taken by an organization. For example, if a company wants to reduce the raw material conversion period, then of course, one possible action that a company can take is to reduce the raw material required for production, okay, to a smaller quantity. You can reduce the company can reduce the raw material required for production to a smaller quantity. All right. Alternatively, the company can adopt just-in-time system, okay, just-in-time system, such that raw material will be purchased only when they are needed, only when raw materials are needed. That is when the company will purchase the raw material. So there will be no need for the company to just keep raw material in the warehouse. So by so doing, the raw material conversion period will reduce drastically. That's one action. Then, how do you reduce the work in progress conversion period? The work in progress conversion period can be reduced by introducing advanced model matching that will bring about efficiency in production with a new in production. Okay, so like I said, to reduce the work in progress conversion period, company can purchase advanced model matching that will bring about efficiency in production. So with the new technology, better and high quality products can be produced at a faster rate. Okay, so that is the action that can be taken for the company to reduce the work in progress conversion cycle. Okay, so company should purchase a new advanced model machine that has the capacity to produce a better and high quality product. Okay, however, this also have its own advantage because capital will be needed to purchase the new technology. If the company does not have the capital to do that, then that action will not be possible. Okay, again, on the first one that I mentioned, that is how to reduce the raw material conversion cycle by purchasing a smaller quantity of raw material or to adopt a just-in-time system okay, system such that material will be purchased only when they are needed. So this may result to stock out. Okay, it may result to stock out, and it may also disrupt production run. So those are some of the disadvantages of trying to reduce the working capital cycle. Then the next one is, how do you reduce the finished goods conversion period? So the finished goods conversion period can be reduced by engaging in aggressive marketing to increase sales and reduce the number of days finished goods ahead in store. Okay. Now, what we are trying to say here is that what I'm trying to say is the fact that, to reduce the finished goods conversion period, company must engage in aggressive marketing. The more sales you are able to make, the less the finished goods that will be kept in the store. Okay, so that means the turnover is high. Once the turnover is high, then that will reduce the finished goods conversion period. Not only that, okay, not only that, um, again, there are disadvantages. Okay, there are disadvantages to doing that. If a company engage in aggressive marketing, there will be costs associated with that, because the company with the marketing expenses or the promotional expenses will increase as a result of that, because the marketing activity is not for free. All right, so the company will need to pay for that. Then the next one is how to reduce, okay, how to reduce the debtors collection period. How can an organization reduce debtors collection period? So the debtors conversion period can be reduced by offering yearly settlement discounts or review the credit terms downwardly. If the credit term is 30 days before, if the company gives like 30 days credit terms to customers, you can reduce this to 15 days. If a company gives 45 days credit terms to customers, you can reduce it to 30 days. By so doing, that will reduce the debtors collection period. Not only that, the company can also engage the service or the services of a debt factoring or debt collection agent. Okay, the company can engage the service of debt factoring or debt collection agent. So with this, the company will be able to receive the receivables, and then of course the responsibility will be transferred to the agent or to the factor. Then finally, the company can also reduce the creditors payment period. In this case, if you want to, you can only increase creditors payment period. When you increase creditor payments period, of course, that will reduce the working capital cycle. So to do this, the company will need to delay payment to suppliers. Okay, the company will need to delay payment to suppliers or negotiate for better and favorable credit terms with the suppliers. Again, this is not going to go for free, because if a company if a company intentionally delay payment to the suppliers, this may impair the credit worthiness of the business with a supplier. The supplier will not be happy for the fact that you delay payment. Okay, but it is better for the business to negotiate with the supplier. Okay, to negotiate better and favorable credit terms with the supplier. So instead of just making an intentional taking an intentional plan or action to delay payment to supplier. All right, so these are the ways in which we can reduce the length of the working capital cycle. Then let's talk about working capital ratio. Okay, the working capital ratio are the matrix. They represent the matrix designed, okay, to measure the liquidity position of a business. Okay, working capital ratios represent the ratio designed to measure the liquidity position of a business. It shows how well a company is meeting its short-term debts and financial obligation as and when due. Therefore, in determining the working capital ratios, the information about the current asset and current liability as shown in the statement of financial position or in the balance sheet of a company are needed, okay, to be able to compute the working capital ratio. Basically, there are the three most common working capital ratio. One is the current ratio, two is the asset test ratio, then three is sales to working capital ratio, which is also known as working capital turnover. So let's talk about current ratio. The current ratio indicates the extent to which current assets will cover short-term creditors. Okay, it is expressed as the relationship between the current asset and current liability. So whenever you want to compute current ratio, simply divide the current asset with the current liability. So that will give the current ratio. When you calculate the current ratio, you need to interpret your result. Therefore, what is the interpretation what's the appropriate interpretation on the current ratio? So the higher the current ratio, the greater the margin of safety for short-term creditors. A higher ratio will indicate a higher level of liquidity. So the more current asset a company has, all things being equal, the better for the business. So a current ratio of 1 will indicate that the book value of his current assets exactly equal the book value of his current liability. Once your current liability and current asset and current liability is ratio 1 to 1, in that case it means that the current assets just equates the current liability. Okay. However, a lower ratio will indicate less liquidity, which implies a greater reliance on operating cash flows and external financing to meet short-term obligations. So generally, the acceptable current ratio vary from industry to industry and is between the ratio of 1.5 and 3, okay, for healthy businesses. The ratio, every industry has its own standard benchmark, all right, but generally the ratio between 1.5 and 3 will represent a healthy ratio for businesses. So that is for current ratio. Let's talk about quick ratio. The quick ratio is also known as acid test or liquid ratio. It measures the ability of a business to meet its short-term obligation using its most liquid assets. Okay, and it is computed as current asset less inventory then over current liability. So how do we interpret quick ratio? Quick ratio is more conservative than the current ratio because it includes only the more liquid current asset in relation to current liability. So the liquid assets are those current assets that can be quickly converted into cash at close to their book values. All right. So inventory is not a liquid asset. Okay. Inventory is not a liquid asset because it might not be easily and readily converted to cash. All right. So the liquid ratio is an indication of a company's financial strength or weaknesses. Okay, financial strength or weakness. It shows how much of the company's available liquid asset can be used to offset the short-term debt obligation at a very short notice. All right. So that is current ratio. There's one more we need to talk about, which is sales to working capital ratio. Okay, the sales to working capital ratio, all right, the sales to working capital ratio represents, also known as the working capital turnover. It measures how judiciously and efficiently a company uses its working capital to support sales and growth. Okay, so the ratio measures the amount of naira or dollar of working capital that is used to generate sales. So it is computed as sales over working capital. So, but where you are given, when you have sales return, then you need to, instead of using sales, you need to use net sales. So the net sales will be the gross sales, the total sales minus sales return plus commission and discount. Okay, so that will give you the net sales. Of course, the working capital, as we know, is the difference between current asset and current liability. So what is the interpretation you need to consider for working capital turnover ratio? A higher working capital turnover ratio is better and indicate that a company can generate more sales through investment in working capital. However, a lower ratio shows that the company is over-investing in working capital or the sales generated are lower than expected. So these are the ratios you need to consider in relation to working capital ratios. So these are the metrics. All right. So let's have illustration to demonstrate our learning on the current on the working capital ratios. Let's have illustration to that effect. Okay. So let's have this illustration. The management of Oliveira PLC desire to review their working capital management policy and has presented the data stated below to you as the newly employed management accountant. In order to assist in taking a meaningful decision, the following data were given. Purchases during the year were 105,120,000 naira and sales were 168 million naira. You are required to calculate sales to working capital ratio, current ratio, quick ratio, and the operating cycle for the working capital. All right. So solution. So what are we going to do? We want to calculate sales to working capital ratio. Number one, sales to working capital ratio. The name of this company is Oliveira. Is it a limited or PLC? PLC. Oliveira PLC. Okay. All right. So we want to calculate sales to working capital ratio. Like we said, the sales to working capital ratio represents the ratio of sales value to working capital. So this is sales divided by working capital. Okay. So the sales value in the question is 168 million. Sales value is 168 million. Here is 168 million. So we need to go and calculate the working capital. So working capital is not given. As you know, working capital will represent the difference between current asset and current liability. So current asset, total current asset is 53,640. Current liability is 10,080,000. So let's quickly do that. So remember, like I said, let's just use this space. So working capital equal to current assets minus current liability, which is equal to current assets is 53,640,000 minus current liability of 10,080,000. So the difference is equal to, so bring out the calculator, 53,640,000 minus 10,080,000. Sorry, 10,080. Okay, that's 43,560. Here is 43,560,000. So that represents the working capital. So I would then come here, divided by 43,560,000. So this will give us, this is equal to ratio 168 million divided by 43,560 million. 43,560,000, that's 3.9, ratio of 3.9 to 1. So it means that the sales can cover the working capital about 4 times. Okay, so that is for that. Then number 2, according to the questions, we also need to compose current ratio. Current ratio measures the relationship between current asset and current liability. So here will be current assets and then current liability. Okay, equal current asset is 53,560. Let's go and confirm. Current asset is 53,640. 53,640,000 divided by current liability of 10,080,000, which is equal to 53,640 divided by 10,080,000. That's 5.3, ratio 5.3 to 1. This is too excessive. This is excessive. Remember, the industry average will vary from industry to industry. However, the ratio between 1.5 and 3 is appropriate for healthy businesses. But for this company, for Oliveira to have ratio 5.3 to 1 is too heavy. That's over investment in working capital, over investment in current assets. Then number 3, we want to calculate acid test ratio, which concentrate on the most liquid assets. So this is current assets minus inventory, because inventory cannot be easily converted to cash. That's why inventory is not part of liquid assets. So divided by current liability. Okay, so this will then be equal to current asset is 53,640,000 minus inventory. How much is inventory? According to the question, inventory is 21,600,000. 21,600,000 divided by 10,080,000. This would then be equal to, okay, that's a 53,640,000 minus 21,600,000 equal 32,040,000 divided by 10,080,000. So this should produce 3.2 to 1. Okay, divided by 10,080,000. Okay, this is ratio 3.2 to 1. So ratio 3.2 to 1. This is still very high. Okay, this is still very high. Ratio 1 to 1 may be ideal. Okay, or 2 to 1 maximum. But to now have 3.2 to 1 is massive. It's massive. So okay, so that's for that. The next one is we are asked to compute the operating cycle for the working capital. So we want to calculate operating cycle. So I would then say number 4, calculating operating cycle. Operating cycle. Okay, so to get the operating cycle, we need to go back to the question to check the variables, the component that we have based on the question given. According to this question, in the table, we have raw material, which means we need to compute raw material conversion period. We also have debtors, so we need to compute debtors collection period. Then finally, we have creditors, so which means we will compute creditors payment period. So there's no work in progress and there's no finished goods. So without wasting time, I would then say I can go ahead and do my workings for that. I can do my working for, okay, let's use it. I will say raw material conversion period. So the raw material conversion period, we put the answer there. We also have debtors collection period. So this will give us the gross operating cycle, because in the question we do not have work in progress and finished goods. Then finally, we are going to have creditors payment period. Okay, so this will now give us the next operating cycle. So let's go and do working for each of them, right? Let's this. Sorry. Then we have this. Okay, so the first working we are going to do is the raw material conversion period, which is raw material divided by purchases multiplied by 365 days. Again, in the question, we are not told whether to use 365 or 360 days for a year. So, all right, so raw material is 21,600,000. Purchases is 105,120. 21,600,000 is the raw material. Purchases is 105,120,000 multiplied by 365. What do we have there? This will be 21,600,000 divided by 105,120,000 multiplied by 365 days. That's 75 days. Okay, so here I will put 75. The next one, debtors collection period. Debtors conversion period will be equal to debtors over credit sales multiplied by 365 days. And then debtors, according to the question, debtors is 32 million. Credit sales is 168 million. 32 million divided by 168 million multiplied by 365 days. This is 32 divided by 168 multiplied by 365. That's 70 days. And finally, the third one is creditors payment period. which is creditors of 10,080,000. Credit purchase is 105, 120. 10 million, creditors divided by credits purchases multiplied by 365 days, which is 10,080,000 divided by 105, 120,000 purchases multiplied by 365 days. This will produce 10,080,000 divided by 105, 120 multiplied by 365 days. That's 35 days. Okay, so here is 70 days. 70 plus 75 will give us 145 days. 145 minus 35 days will give us 110 days. Therefore, the operating cycle is 110 days. Okay, the operating cycle is 110 days. So I can then say note 365 days is assumed for a year. So that's that. Okay, so we have completed so far we have solved two practical illustrations. So let's go back to the outline for today. Okay, let's talk about, we have talked about working capital ratio and how to estimate working capital ratio. Finally, let's talk about over-capitalization, under-capitalization, and the determinant of working capital. Okay? All right. So what do you understand by over-capitalization? Okay, let's talk about over-capitalization. The over-capitalization is also known as under-trading. Okay? My pen is not connecting. Let me see. Okay, it's back. So we want to talk about over-capitalization. So what do you understand by over-capitalization? Like I said, the over-capitalization is also known as under-capitalization. It occurs where a company is excessively and financially equipped to conduct a larger volume of trade than necessary. When a company commits so much, okay, there is so much excessive current assets relative to a small current liability or account payables. That means the company is over-investing in current assets. So when this happens, it means that the company is under trading. All right. So it represents a situation whereby a company is over-investing in current assets such that inventories, okay, account receivables, and cash equivalents are excessive, and that few account payable are available to the business. So what are the major symptoms of overcapitalization? When a company is under trading, there will be high turnover ratio. Okay, there will be high turnover ratio. There will be low return on investments. Okay, so symptoms. Let me write it out. Symptoms will include one, high turnover ratio. Then two, okay, there will be low return on capital. Low return on capital. Then number three, there will be high current ratio. High current ratio, because of course it is expected that current ratio will be excessively high because there is so much investment in current assets like inventory, cash and cash equivalent, accounts receivable are so much. They are so much such that there is little account payable. So as a result, the current ratio will be excessively high. Then number four, symptom will be there will be excessive surplus funds. Okay, excessive idle or surplus funds. These funds should have been invested in short-term marketable securities, but the company is so much. The company has over-invested in current assets. So what that simply means is that there will be so much of idle funds that could have been invested in short-term marketable security to earn return. Okay, so these are some of the symptoms of overcapitalization. Let's talk about undercapitalization. All right, let's talk about undercapitalization. The undercapitalization is also known as overtrading. Okay, undercapitalization is also known as overtrading. It represents a situation whereby a company attempts to conduct a larger volume of trade than it is financially equipped to do. All right, so a company may be said to be overtrading when it tries to do too much too quickly with little or no financial resources at its disposal. All right, so that is under capitalization. So like I said, it's also known as overtrading. So what are the symptoms? So the symptoms include number one, low liquidity ratio. Okay, low liquidity because the company will not be liquid because you rely so much on credit facilities to run your business. So as a result, the company will not be liquid, just be running from one supplier to another, from one bank to the another to seek for credit facilities. All right, so number one symptom is low liquidity. Okay, so of course, because the current asset is lower, then so there will be low liquidity ratio. Then two, the second symptom of overtrading is bank overdrafts will always reach or exceed the limits of the facility agreed with the banks. Okay, bank overdrafts. Okay, bank overdrafts will reach. Okay, um, uh-oh. Yeah, bank overdraft will reach or exceed, okay, or exceed the limits, the limits of the facility. Agree with the bank. Let me write that. Agreed with the bank. So almost every time you'll be asking for overdrafts. In most cases, you are going to a company that is over trading will always exceed the credit facility granted. Okay, then number three, let's talk about, of course, another symptom is rapid growth in current and fixed assets. Rapid growth in current and fixed assets fixed assets. Then number four, there will be low average collection period. Low average collection period. This is expected because the company does not have sufficient, the company is not liquid, so the company will not want to give a longer or a liberal credit terms to the customers. So quickly you want to make sales and collect your money. All right, so it is expected that there will be low average collection period. So these are some of the symptoms of overtrading, and we said that we started from overcapitalization. We said overcapitalization is the same thing as undertrading. So when a company is overinvesting, in current assets with little, with low current liability or account payable, that means the company is under trading. So we said that we talk about the symptom of overcapitalization to include high turnover ratio, low return on capital, high current ratio, and then the excessive idle funds. Then we talk about overtrading. We said overtrading is the same thing as undercapitalization, and overtrading represents a situation whereby a company is trying to do too much too quickly with little or no capital to support the trade. So when this happens, there could be low liquidity ratio. The bank overdrafts will always reach or even exceed the limit of the credit facilities, okay, agreed with the bank. Then number three, overcapitalization or overtrading rather can result to low growth in current asset and also fixed asset. Then finally, there will be low average collection period. So these are some of the symptoms of undercapitalization and overcapitalization. Finally, let's talk about determinants of working capital. Let's talk about determinant of working capital. So let's talk about the determinants of working capital. Let's talk about determinants of working capital. That will be the last item we are going to discuss in this class. The determinants of working capital varies from industry to industry, and generally the working capital requirements influence the liquidity position of an organization, and it is dependent on several factors, including number one, business cycle. So companies operate in a business environment that is affected by factors such as economic, political, legal, and technological factors. For instance, companies tend to require more working capital to satisfy customer demands during the period of economic boom, and then less working capital will be required when the economy is struggling, that is, when there is a depression period because of low demand. So generally, during the business cycle, company with depending on the nature of the cycle. For example, when there is economic boom, so more working capital will be needed because there will be high demand for the company's products. But when the economy is experiencing depression or contraction, then of course there will be low demand. In that case, a lesser working capital will be required. Then, number two, factors to consider in working capital requirement is the nature and size of the business. Okay, so working capital requirement is different from industry to industry. The amount of working capital that will be required by a manufacturing company will be different from that of a service company. For example, in the service industry, no inventory is needed. Of course, a manufacturing company majorly trades with inventories. Therefore, the amount of working capital will be relatively low for a service company, okay, relative to as compared with a manufacturing company. A manufacturing company will need high volume of working capital, whereas a service company will not need as much as working capital to run the business. Then the third factor to consider is inflation, which is also known as price level changes. So during the period of inflations, uh, companies generally will invest more in working capital because the purchasing power of money has fallen. Therefore, more capital will be needed to purchase the raw material for the company to be able to produce. So as a result, more cash will be needed. Okay, more cash will be needed to buy the raw materials and other supplies. Okay, and yeah, so then the fourth one is the company's credit policy. The credit policy of the company also affects the working capital in that a liberal or generous credit term will require more investment in working capital. If a company is loose, okay, if a company is loose or liberal in relation to credit policy, of course, a more working capital will be required for the business. But if the working capital or if the credit policy is tight, then a lower working capital will be required for the business. Okay, so the company's credit policy have material effects on the amount of working capital that will be required. Then the next one is seasonality. Seasonality, there are some products that are affected by seasonal variation. During this period, there's usually a high and low demand, okay, at a specific period of the year. For example, during the festive period, companies tend to produce more of the product to take advantage of market condition. Therefore, more working capital will be required at that period. But during other period in the year, whereby there is no festive activities, of course, the the working capital required may be relatively stable during that period. Then the next one is when the company is experiencing growth and expansion. So more working capital will be needed when a company is growing and expanding rapidly. So during this period, more cash will be required to purchase inventories to satisfy customer demand. Not only that, there will be also cash will be needed to purchase, to buy supplies, okay, to buy supplies and all of that. So generally, when a company is growing and expanding, so more working capital will be needed relative to when a company is contracting activities. When a company is contracting, okay, a company is shrinking its activity, then of course a lower working capital will be required. Then the next one is, or the last one we are going to talk about is the availability of credit from the suppliers. So companies will need more cash to purchase raw material and other supplies if the supplier has a restrictive credit policy. Okay, if the supplier is not willing to grant credits, okay, to the company, then in that case, the company will need a high working capital to be able to purchase raw material when needed. So these are some of the determinants of working capital requirements. And so far, we have covered all the outlines that we want to do today. We started with the introduction to working capital management. We spoke about the working capital cycle and then how to compute working capital cycle. I also demonstrated for you how to reduce the working capital cycle. Then we move on to discussing the working capital ratios, where we talk about the sales to working capital ratio, we talk about current ratio, talk about acid test ratio. Then we also discuss the over-capitalization and then under-capitalization. Then finally, we just discuss the determinants or factors or criteria for uh, determining or criteria of working capital requirements. So that will be the end of the class for today. See you in the next class. Bye-bye.